Hey, what's up, guys? It's me, Ellie, aka Looks from the Crypt. I hope you guys had like a super duper awesome Halloween. I know I sure did. I took that little break because I filmed a lot during the month of October, but here I am. I'm back. I'm ready. I'm well rested.
Let's fucking go.
So, due to the recent popularity of just Jeffrey Dahmer in general, due to the Netflix limited series or whatever they fucking call those. Anyway, starring Evan Pierce, the one, that one. With the popularity of that made me want to talk about a Jeffrey Dahmer movie that nobody fucking talks about. And no, we are not talking My Friend Dahmer. We're not talking Dahmer from 2002. None of that. Not what's the like a fucking terrible one I want to say? It's from one of those shitty production companies like Asylum. It's like Dahmer versus Bundy or whatever. We're not talking about that. We are talking about The Secret Life of Jeffrey Dahmer. So if this bizarre ass Jeffrey Dahmer movie from the 90s that was a made for TV movie sounds interesting to get into at all, grab a snack, grab a drink, and keep on watching. And I just want to preface by saying I am not here to get into fact versus fiction, the things that they get right or the things that they get wrong. I am quite, I don't want to say true crime fan, because that sounds fucking gross, but I'm a person who consumes true crime media. I know right now, like, true crime is definitely like a hot button topic in the sense of people are really up in arms about whether or not you consume true crime media or if you're against it, etc., etc. I understand people's reasoning for not wanting to or thinking it's wrong, but I don't necessarily agree. Personally, I feel like true crime has actually helped me in quite a way in the sense of just being aware of the horrors of the world out there, in the sense that it definitely made me a lot more self-aware in what I do, my routines, and more aware of what to look for in other people. And then again, also, I mean, it inspired me to take like a self-defense class, etc., etc., and just being vigilant as a person. So I'm neither here nor there. I understand all points or like all feelings amongst the spectrum, except for like the like weird like Tumblr bitches that have like tattoos of Columbine and stuff like that. Like the serial killer fetishism is wrong, and that's where I draw the line. And I in particular heavily want to like blame popular like news media for the glamorization and fetishization of serial killers, because they always give them like the fucking coolest names that they are not worthy of whatsoever. So, although being familiar with the story, this is not a true crime channel. So, I am not really going to get into what is fact versus fiction necessarily. I'm more so here to talk about this movie simply as a film. Hello, this is me, Editing Ellie here. I just want to say I'm not going to be like showing the kills or anything like that, just because this isn't really a movie where I could be like ranking that or really being like, oh shit, dude, that kill was so awesome. Since like it's pretty insensitive considering this like literally what happened to a person. So we won't be showing any of that. However, there will be moments of like sometimes like the weird shit and like the aftermath. Like there's like a particularly weird scene of Jeffrey Dahmer like holding like a decomposing skull like a baby and shit like that. So there will be some things, but not straight up kills. And I will preface, this movie was made in 1993, a year before Jeffrey Dahmer's death. He was murdered in prison. This is like, this sounds like fucking like, I'm talking about like anime or something, but like, this movie was filmed during like Jeffrey Dahmer's like Christianity, like personality character arc, and that seems to reflect in this film. So we're just trying to look at The Secret Life of Jeffrey Dahmer as a film and not really getting into the crime itself. However, of course, you can't talk about the film without necessarily talking about, of course, Jeffrey Dahmer. So there will be some light touchings, but that's not really the main focus of what I'm trying to do here. And with this being a serial killer like movie, a lot of this stuff is really jarring and hitting, but like in like a way that you wouldn't really anticipate necessarily. So the opening text goes fucking hard. Just saying, the opening text basically detailing the events that are based on a true story will be portrayed on screen. Some of the events, of course, are fictionalized or sensationalized, and some of what we may see will conflict with real details. However, I did find this movie to be pretty accurate in terms of this kind of media. At the end of the day, only Jeffrey Dahmer knows the real truth. Regardless of that, 17 young men lost their lives at the hands of Dahmer. Jeffrey narrates his troubled youth of being an alcoholic by the age of 16, began torturing / killing animals, that eventually escalated to him fantasizing about what it would be like to carry out those acts on a real person, due to how much pleasure it gave him. And one of the most chilling things is that he explains nothing inspired him to have these thoughts, yet they are his own organic thoughts, and he takes pride in that. Jeffrey, he begins detailing his first murder. He has fantasized about picking up a hitchhiker to dismember. Then, after graduation, he found like the perfect scenario kind of just dropped into his lap. I just kind of want to note how powerful this narration is. It's all being said with such care, thought, and conviction, which makes you feel something to hear it be said in like almost so sincerely. Meanwhile, it's like still like a really weird tone. It has made for TV, almost soap opera-esque like a representation. Fast forward, Jeffrey has a dude over to hang out, work out with him. He literally does a set of weights. And just saying, like, they literally like just got there. Like, just saying. Which then angers Jeffrey that he wants to leave so early, so he strikes him with the weight, drags him under into the crawl space. Jeffrey then states how he is horrified, yet also exhilarated by this experience. So now Jeffrey is left with a body to dispose of, which he does via chopping up and driving out to somewhere to drop off. Jeffrey gets pulled over, yet the cops neglect to check the trunk.
If the cops that pulled me over that night had bothered to look in the back seat, it would have saved a lot of lives.
Jeff has a good 8 years or so living with his grandma, maintaining a long distance relationship with his father, and getting a job at the plasma center as like a phlebotomist. Basically just trying to bury his fantasy life and resisting his urges just to carry out a normal life after murdering two people. 8 years after the first murder, Jeffrey takes a guy home from the club. They're both pretty drunk. They rent a hotel room to hook up. However, they are both too drunk to fuck. Yet the next morning, Jeff wakes up to a dead body. At some point during the drunken stupor overnight, he blacks out and murdered this man. And this scene is particularly difficult to watch as it's conveyed he truly had no intention of killing this man and is horrified about what had happened. And this scene in particular is pretty difficult to watch just because it's conveyed that Jeffrey had absolutely no intent of killing this man, is absolutely horrified by his own actions. Now he is once faced again with having to dispose of a body. With the body in the shower, he's dismembering and collecting in like a bag. And Jeffrey's scared of being caught, so he gets a suitcase and stuffs all the body parts in it and takes it home with him to his grandmother's house. And some time goes by and it starts to reek, of course, and his grandmother, she's trying to figure out what that smell must be and where it's coming from. And she eventually kind of figures out it's coming from Jeff's room, and Jeffrey comes home conveniently right when she notices, and he blames it on fell asleep while eating cheeseburgers, and that is the leftover cheeseburgers. Now, Jeffrey is going out with an intention. He is not succumbing to the life that he was trying to suppress. Now he is going to his favorite gay club, or at least presumably, because he's always there, with crush-up pills to slip in people's drinks to knock them out. Luring men back to his place under the guise of being paid for nude photos, and he is offering $150 just for a couple nude photos, which even by today's standards is quite a bit of money. And the narration of Jeff, he explains that he never had intentions of killing these young men. Just the thought of them leaving disturbed him so much, so he had to drug them and murder them so that they could be with him forever. Eventually, disappointed that the murders are a waste of a beautiful life that could be with him, he comes to the realization that he could be preserving body parts to forever be with him like a friend, and it isn't just a waste anymore. This scene is honestly fucking really disturbing, and especially with sounds weird, the weird emotional made for TV music with this really strange voiceover narration seems like it would make it worse, like worse in quality. But however, I feel like it kind of like hits you a little bit harder with like those aspects. Jeff, he decides to start taking on his victims in a multitude of ways, and kind of like whenever some like an opportunity comes up, now posing as like a good Samaritan, offering to help gain trust, offering a man with a broken down car a ride home, and seeing if he can like work on his car there. The man does get drugged, but he escapes. He calls the police, yet Dahmer doesn't receive any negative repercussions for this. This is a close call, however, it doesn't instill any fear in Dahmer, so he's continuing his ways. Continuing on with his ways, the next guy that he picks up is a guy who is also here under the guise, being paid $150 or so just to take some photos. However, he wakes up after being drugged in Dahmer's like laboratory, basically, which appears to be his basement, where he wakes up and sees a lot of like cruel weapons, a decaying human skull, acid, and then he like realizes his fate within this moment. And this film is kind of broken up in eras, and at this point we've covered 82 through 88. During this time, Dahmer killed 4 young men, disposed of their bodies in his grandmother's home. Grandma at this point is kind of over Jeff's like antics. He's like, seeking guys in and out, or I guess just in, and then like his drinking, etc., etc., etc. His father calls him to basically kick him out of his grandmother's house and tells him he has a week to get out. While Jeff is setting up his new apartment, he explains how having this dark secret makes it difficult for him to not warp other aspects of his life. However, he is maintaining these other aspects of his life, his professional life, etc. Despite the fact he appears to be bleeding those lines, because he does explain that he does keep a human skull in his work locker. And Jeff, he proceeds to explain that he is maintaining this like work / like murder double life situation pretty well, so that at this point he has no intentions of abandoning his compulsions to commit murder. Not processing the corpses are really dead because he still has a connection to them. Jeff isn't really able to process that the corpses are really dead because he still does have this connection with them that he's making via, preserving them, and he feels like they are his friends that are with him forever, explaining that these are crimes of love and he's killing them to possess them permanently. Jeff is only in his new apartment for a fucking day before he decides to pick up somebody new. This time it's a boy walking home from school. The neighbors call police because they saw Jeffrey bring a minor into his apartment. Of course, finding a drugged minor, they arrest Dahmer for the sexual assault and enticing a child for immoral purposes. He is sentenced for 5 years work program and probation. 1989, giving his parole officer his life story, explaining how he has grown up abused and kind of just trying to rationalize and explain his behavior now and how this is a result of his past. Between June 1990 and July 1991, 13 young men were brutally murdered and dismembered in apartment 213. Jeffrey, again, he pulls the old photo trick, bringing a man home who he wants to try something else on. This time he is attempting to make like a human zombie. And his goal is to try to capture this man somewhere between life and death. And we watched the surgery occur. And again, this did happen to real people in real life. And it's extremely disturbing and jarring to see. And that's why this is so difficult to sit through, is because, this fucking actually happened to people. Is it like the most graphic movie ever? No, but that's probably for good reason, because it doesn't really need to be to make you feel something. Despite being like a fucking made-for-TV movie, our main character who plays Jeffrey Dahmer, who stars, produced, and wrote this movie, he like honestly is fucking acting his ass off throughout this whole thing. And so are like a lot of the characters. Like the acting overall is pretty good, so it kind of really drives it home. Jeff's neighbors begin to get pretty upset and suspicious of the wretched smell coming from his apartment. All I gotta say is I have a history of perpetually ending up living next to like really fucking smelly people, and I can kind of relate to like the frustration that these people are having, but it's definitely fucking like times 10 because it's a rotting corpse as opposed to like whatever the fuck I was dealing with.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm doing everything I can.
Well, do something, you son of a bitch. Me can't believe you got the whole place stinking up like this. What the hell is a rump roast anyway?
Bro, I was wondering the same thing, but I was way too scared to ask. Dahmer brings home yet another man after being drugged. He escapes, wakes up, tells the police about everything. However, the police won't investigate. Jeff's like estranged mother that hasn't like talked to him in like over 5 years gives him a call explaining how she now works with like AIDS patients. So now she understands his sexuality since a lot of the AIDS patients that she's working with are also gay. And this just brings like Jeffrey to tears because he hasn't fucking heard from her in like literally like years. And now she's calling to say that she has like this newfound empathy for him. And however, she gets a call and hangs up on him without him being able to get her number or anything so he can try to talk to her again. And he's left very upset about this, feeling like she like re-traumatized him all over again. Jeff is basically just continuing with his experimentations that he did with animals as a child. However, he's translating it to humans and adding on to those findings that he had already found previously. Jeff, he encounters his first non-drinker, so he's struggling to get him where he wants him to be in this vulnerable position where he's unconscious and he can do whatever to him.
So look, let me get you a beer, okay?
Nah, man, I don't drink. I don't drink. Just eat. I don't drink. That's pretty good, man.
What about an ice cold pop, man? It's no problem, really.
Nah, cause that stuff got too much sugar in it, man. I don't mess with that stuff either. Wow.
How about a glass of ice water? It's a little dry. Let me give you a nice cold glass.
Nah, man, just relax, man.
It's no trouble, seriously, really.
Finally, he gets him to agree to a soda, and so he can finally drug him. And at this point in time, I just want to note something about this movie that kind of makes it hit even fucking more. It does this thing where it gives like all of the like victims of Jeffrey Dahmer a little like glimpse of their personality and glimpse into maybe who they were. In a way, it's really humanizing and it's really personalized, which I feel like is a really important thing to do when it comes to true crime media, like movies and stuff like that, to acknowledge that these were people, and kind of also helps drive that point home that these are real people because you get to see these little bits of them a way that's like personable, you know what I mean? And I feel like some movies really fail to do that because it's a movie about a serial killer as opposed to the victims. However, this does this in a really like great way that makes you feel awful. We get the touch of personality and character with each victim, and that's something that truly sets this movie apart from others like this. It really just helps emphasize the fact that these are real events that happen to real people. And this leads us to another fucking horrific moment because, well, we spend like an extra amount of time with this guy because he's trying to negotiate with him to take something so that he can finally drug him. And then once he does wake up, he does shove him into like a huge barrel of acid, and we just hear like the screams, and it's absolutely horrifying. And mind you, just another reason why like this story is such fucking bullshit. This was all happening within like an apartment complex, and like nothing was done. And I'm sorry, I like, this one is particularly heartbreaking and disturbing to me. Jeff, he encounters like a deaf man who's waiting for the bus stop that he saw at the club previously, but didn't get to talk to him. But however, he sees him at the bus stop and he brings him home to take pictures under that same guise. And it just really like, this one sucks like to watch, honestly. He takes his pictures and stuff like that. Is, just chilling and like reading a magazine. And he doesn't hear like Jeff come, and he's coming with like a loud saw that he just like cuts his head off with. And Jeff is like saying they're like taunting him before the act that he can't hear him. And this one just kind of like, it's all really bad and hurtful, but this one hurts. And then Jeff, being a sick fucking bastard that I fucking hate, he prank phone calls one of the victims' families knowing that their son is dead. And I just want to say again, another reason why I'm commending this movie is because they are showing us this. They did not show us a fucking single thing that makes you sympathize with Dahmer, in all honesty. I mean, there might be like the subtle attempts with him being kicked off his grandmother's house and like his estranged mother contacting him and still being so cold and distant, etc., etc., etc. But they make sure to highlight and show you how fucking terrible he is. So even if you're starting to have like that subtle feeling, it all gets depleted like immediately. Now we have so many complaints from Jeff's neighbors about this wretched stench coming from his apartment, repeatedly ignored. No action from property management or the landlord, causing tensions to rise within the neighbors who are tired of the scent. And with that being said, another thing, I know I said I was going to do fact versus fiction or anything like that, but another really important part of this story too is I feel like the complaints from the neighbors who are making these complaints being ignored is a big part of this, but also Jeffrey's parole officer was supposed to be coming to go see him and making like house visits to him. However, she thought it was a bad neighborhood and wasn't showing up, and clearly that would have been two things that could have maybe put an end to this sooner. Yet another really upsetting one. So Dahmer attempts another experiment with a minor injecting acid solution to holes he drilled into his head. He runs out of beer, so he goes on a fucking beer run and leaves the kid unattended. That he wakes up and finds help from women on the street. They call the cops who release the kid back to Dahmer, saying that because Dahmer explains that the child is his lover. However, they're completely disregarding the fact that he has these holes in his head. He is bleeding from his anus and is clearly like not okay and literally a fucking kid. And again, despite the physical condition of the child, the women's testimonies, everyone, even Dahmer, is in disbelief that the police would hand him back to him. July 22nd, 1991, Jeffrey explains that he grows more and more comfortable with the fact in the back of his mind that eventually he will be caught, thinking maybe subconsciously this is kind of what he wants. He takes home a man who's kind of apprehensive. He like handcuffs him to him and sadistically is showing him photos of the others, of decaying corpses, the dismemberment, etc., calling them his friends, and it's really fucked up. Dahmer has like a knife up to him, but however, he's able to overpower him by kicking him in the chest, and he's able to escape and get help from the yet again hesitant police, and they finally take him seriously eventually and go to Dahmer's apartment. Dahmer is feeling pretty confident, however, because he's always been able to talk himself out of these things. Yet, he's not in luck this time, because the police, they go in and they're hearing the dude out, and they handcuff Dahmer, and they're noticing the wretched fucking smell. Despite not having a fucking warrant, that's like, almost like a meme, because Jeffrey's on the ground, being detained by one officer, being like, do you have a fucking warrant? Do you have a warrant to search my home? And it's like, well, we don't really need one, because we just opened the fridge and saw several severed heads in there. They discover all sorts of weird chemicals, body parts, dismembered heads in the freezer, and photos of the mutilated bodies. Jeff, at this point, this is kind of why I went in, but in the sense that this was clearly filmed, or clearly inspired by Dahmer's, like, Christianity era, because he blames the devil for his actions, and that this is because he strayed away from God. Dahmer is 33, serving a minimum sentence of 936 years. Dahmer confessed to the killing and dismembering of 17 men and found sane by the jury in 92 because he was willing to have sex with men who are both alive and not alive. This film at the end is dedicated to all the victims plus the one who ended it all. So yeah, that was quite a wild ride. I highly recommend this movie if you are like a person who is comfortable with consuming true crime media. I would say that this is probably one of the like better movies I've seen based on like a real event that happened like this, like a serial killer movie, in the sense of, I kind of explained it throughout my review. However, we do get a lot of the touch of like character and personality from the victims, and you're able to like acknowledge and feel that they are real people, and it really emphasizes the point that these are real things that happen to real people. In addition, yes, it does have its grisly moments, however, it's not really gratuitous in the same way as other films. I feel like a lot of things about like the narration and the like sound of this movie really helps like set a tone that's really impactful. And I also enjoyed how this movie, there's no fucking questions, ifs, ands, or buts about it. Whereas, personally, I have fucking I'm big mad about the Ted Bundy movie starring Zac Efron. Just because, for example, if you watch that movie with no greater context, if it like Larry wasn't called like Ted Bundy or whatever, you would think that it's a movie about an innocent man who got blamed or like framed for these murders. Whereas with The Secret Life of Jeffrey Dahmer is just a really raw and like shitty thing to watch, in the sense that it's very purposeful with its intentions and what it wants to show and how it wants to depict things to you. We are not to sympathize with Dahmer, and it really drives that in. And this is like just like a really weird sitting line. So I know a lot of people find this movie to be exploitative, which I totally understand, just because it does show the depictions of these murders, etc. However, I don't really think it does a disservice to telling the story, in the sense of it doesn't glamorize, it doesn't fetishize, it doesn't idolize Dahmer in any kind of way. And you don't feel bad for him, which I know is something I've said a few times, but it doesn't try to make you feel bad for him like how other serial killer movies do. I just want to say also, since I did say in the greater sense we were going to be talking about this movie as a film, and I feel like this movie as a standalone piece, just a movie you watch, is honestly a very good movie. The storytelling is there. It's really impactful, and it just has a very inoffensive, very palatable feel to it as well. I'm going to give The Secret Life of Dahmer 3. So I'm teetering between 3.5 and 4 stars, because I do really like this movie as a movie and as a piece of like true crime media. And just like another thing I want to mention about this movie, I have it on tape, and my partner collects like the Dead Alive / Brain Damage tapes, etc., etc. Didn't have this one, so we got this one, and since it is Dead Alive Productions, I thought this was going to be an absolutely dog shit movie. If you're familiar with them, you would understand. So this probably gets like extra points for me, just because I went to this expecting nothing and got a whole lot out of it. Anyways, The Secret Life of Jeffrey Dahmer, if this is something you're interested in and would like to watch, the full movie is uploaded on YouTube. I will put a link in the description or in the comments. This has been me, Ellie, aka Looks from the Crypt, and I am out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. See you later.